The gray clouds hung low over the cities of HFY like a death shroud that would not lift. Tejo watched from his window as another transport ship landed at the medical center below, its cargo hold full of the dying. The ships came every hour now, bringing more victims of what the doctors called the Gray Death. He pressed his blue-scaled hand against the glass and felt the vibrations of despair rising from the streets. 3 months ago, the archaeological team on Volani 7 had found the ancient ruins buried deep beneath the frozen surface. They thought they had discovered treasure from the old civilization that once ruled this system. Instead, they had unleashed something that should have stayed buried forever. The first symptoms appeared within days of opening the sealed chamber. A slight grayness to the skin, then fatigue, then pain that no medicine could stop. Within 2 weeks, the gray would spread across the body like rust on metal, and the victim would die screaming. Dr. Haywan stood in the emergency medical center, her white coat stained with the gray fluid that leaked from every patient. She had been working for 36 hours straight, but sleep was impossible when people kept dying in her hands. The Volani had the best medical technology in this part of the galaxy, but nothing worked against this plague. Their cellular regeneration machines broke down when they touched the gray infection. Their miracle drugs had no effect. Even their most advanced life support systems could only delay death for a few days. "Doctor, we have lost another ward," her assistant said quietly. The young nurse had stopped crying 3 days ago when there were no more tears left. 20 more patients had died in the night, bringing the total death count to over 50,000 on Volani Prime alone. The reports from the other colonies were even worse. Volani 7, where it all started, was completely silent now. 200 million people lived on the 3 Volani worlds. At the current rate of infection, they would all be dead within 6 months. Haywan walked to her office and collapsed into her chair. The computer screen showed messages from medical centers across the system, all asking for help she could not give. The Galactic Medical Council had sent observers, but they were too afraid to get close. The Federation health ships had come to the edge of the system, taken some readings, and left quickly. Everyone was terrified that the Gray Death might spread to their own worlds. But there was one message that caught her attention. It was from the Galactic Communications Array, a reply to a desperate transmission they had sent 3 days ago. The message was simple. Human medical response team en route. Estimated arrival, 4 days. Do not lose hope. Humans. Haywan had heard strange stories about them. They were a young species, only recently arrived on the galactic scene, but their reputation was growing fast. Some said they were warriors who could defeat armies with small squads. Others claimed they were brilliant scientists who could cure any disease. Most species were not sure what to make of these mammals who seemed to excel at everything they tried. The Volani government had sent their distress call to every major medical organization in the galaxy. Most had ignored them or sent polite refusals. A few had promised to study the problem from a safe distance. Only the humans had said they would come to help. The message said they were sending their most advanced medical ships and their best doctors. It was the first hope anyone had felt in weeks. Prime Minister Jae Sung stood before the Planetary Council, his green robes hanging loose on his weakening frame. Even the government officials were getting sick now. The Gray Death did not care about rank or wealth or power. "The humans will arrive tomorrow," he announced to the half-empty chamber. Many council members were too ill to attend, and others were caring for dying family members. "Are we sure this is wise?" asked Council Member Boram, her voice weak but still worried. "We know so little about them. What if they want something in return? What if they cannot help and we have revealed our weakness to another species?" These were valid concerns. In the galactic community, showing vulnerability often led to conquest. Many civilizations had been enslaved or destroyed when they asked for help during times of crisis. "We are already dying," Jae Sung replied. "If the humans want to take our worlds, they will have only empty planets filled with corpses. If they can save even some of our people, it is worth the risk." The Prime Minister did not say what everyone was thinking. They had no choice. The Volani military was in shambles, with most ships grounded because their crews were sick or dead. Their defenses were failing. Their economy was collapsing. They were no longer a threat to anyone. In the depths of space, far from any star, the human message relay station picked up the Volani transmission. Communications Officer Min Ho read the desperate plea for medical assistance and immediately forwarded it to Earth Command. The message was marked with the highest priority codes. When humans received a medical emergency call, everything else stopped. Admiral Wu Jin Lee was in his quarters aboard the UES Asclepius when the emergency order arrived. He had been reading reports about patrol activities in the Outer Rim, but now all of that was forgotten. The order was simple and direct. Proceed immediately to Kepler 442 system. Full medical intervention authorized. Save as many as possible. Lee walked to the bridge of his flagship, his boots echoing in the corridors that had once carried soldiers to war. The Asclepius was over 2 kilometers long and bristled with equipment that most species would not recognize. It looked like a warship because it had been won, back when humanity still fought wars. Now it served a different purpose, but its appearance had not changed much. Navigation, set course for the Kepler 442 system, maximum hyperspace velocity, Lee ordered. Communications, send word to all ships in the 7th Medical Division. We have an emergency response mission. Within minutes, 11 other ships received the same message. They were scattered across 3 star systems, but they would all converge on the dying Volani worlds. Captain So-Ra Kim was aboard the UES Nightingale when the call came. Her ship was smaller than the Asclepius, but just as well equipped for medical emergencies. She had served in the medical corps for 15 years and had seen many horrors, but the description of the Grey Death was worse than anything in her experience. The Volani reports described a plague that attacked the basic structure of life itself, turning healthy cells into gray sludge within days. Dr. Park, report to the bridge, she announced over the ship's communication system. Medical Officer Taman Park was the best xenobiologist in the fleet, with advanced degrees in alien physiology and biochemistry. If anyone could understand this plague, it would be him. Park arrived quickly, still wearing his research coat covered with notes and chemical stains. Captain, I have been studying the Volani data. This Grey Death is unlike anything I have seen before. It appears to be some form of advanced nanotechnology, possibly a biological weapon from an extinct civilization. The way it breaks down cellular structures suggests it was designed to be unstoppable. Can we cure it? Kim asked. This was always the first question when dealing with alien diseases. Humans had developed remarkable medical technology over the centuries, but every species was different. What worked for humans might kill a Volani, and what saved a Volani might be useless against human biology. I believe so, Park replied carefully. Our nanobotic medical systems should be able to identify and neutralize the plague nanobots. The challenge will be doing it fast enough to save the infected. From the reports, the disease progresses very quickly once it takes hold. He paused and looked at the data again. Captain, we will need to work directly with the patients. Remote treatment will not be sufficient. We will have to go down to the planets and work in the infected areas. Kim nodded. This was expected. Human medical teams never operated from a safe distance. They went where the patients were, no matter how dangerous it might be. It was part of their philosophy that healing required personal contact and care. Other species thought this was foolish and risky. Humans considered it necessary. The 12 ships of the 7th Medical Division entered hyperspace together, their powerful engines pushing them toward the Kepler 442 system at speeds that few other civilizations could match. Inside each ship, medical teams prepared for what they expected to be a difficult but routine mission. They had responded to plagues before, helped with natural disasters, and provided emergency medical care across the galaxy. They were confident in their abilities and their equipment. None of them knew that their arrival would terrify the very people they were coming to save, or that other forces were already moving to take advantage of Volani weakness. The humans came to heal. But the galaxy would see them as something very different. In 4 days, everything would change for both the Volani and the humans who rushed to save them. The 12 ships of the 7th Medical Division cut through hyperspace like silver arrows aimed at the heart of a dying system. Admiral Wu Jin Lee stood on the bridge of the UES Asclepius, watching the swirling blue energy of hyperspace flow past the viewports. In 3 days, they would reach the Volani worlds. 3 days to prepare for a medical emergency unlike anything they had faced before. The Asclepius was the largest ship in the fleet, a massive vessel that stretched over 2 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull was painted white with large red crosses marking it as a medical ship, but the underlying structure told a different story. The ship had been built as a dreadnought during the last Great War, designed to break enemy battle lines with overwhelming firepower. Now it carried hospitals instead of weapons, medical laboratories instead of ammunition, and doctors instead of soldiers. Chief Medical Officer Dae-Yun Choi walked through the main medical bay, inspecting the equipment that would soon be needed to save millions of lives. The bay was enormous, capable of treating thousands of patients at once. Medical robots moved between the beds, running diagnostic checks and preparing treatment supplies. Everything was ready, but Choi could not shake the feeling that they were missing something important about this plague. "Doctor, the latest Vallani. Transmissions are coming in," announced her assistant medical technician Young-Ho. The communications array had been receiving regular updates from the dying worlds, and each report was worse than the last. The infection rate was accelerating, and the death toll was climbing toward 100,000. Entire cities were going silent as the Gray Death spread through the population. Choi studied the new data on her tablet computer. The Vallani had sent detailed medical scans of infected patients, tissue samples, and even video recordings of the disease progression. What she saw made her stomach tighten with worry. "This is not a natural plague," she said quietly. "Look at how perfectly it targets cellular repair mechanisms. Look at how it spreads through the body in exact patterns. This was designed by someone who understood biology better than we do." On the bridge, Captain Hyun-Woo Kang of the UES Asclepius reviewed the tactical situation with Admiral Lee. The Kepler 442 system was located in a contested region of space where several galactic powers maintained competing interests. "Sir, we are detecting increased military activity in the surrounding systems," Kang reported. "The hegemony has moved 3 battle groups to positions near Vallani space. The Federation has also increased patrol activities in the area." Lee frowned at this news. The hegemony was a collection of aggressive species that expanded their territory by conquering weakened civilizations. If they were moving forces toward Vallani space, it meant they saw opportunity in the plague. "Keep monitoring their movements. We may need to revise our approach depending on what we find when we arrive." In the engineering sections of the medical ships, teams worked around the clock to prepare specialized equipment for the mission. Engineering Chief Yoo-Jin Seo supervised the installation of new medical fabrication units that could produce custom nanobots for treating alien physiology. These machines had been developed specifically for xenobiological emergencies, but they had never been tested on anything as deadly as the Gray Death. "The fabricators are ready, but we will need direct tissue samples to calibrate them properly," SEO reported to Captain Kim aboard the UES Nightingale. "We cannot create effective treatment nanobots until we understand exactly how this plague operates at the molecular level." This meant the medical teams would have to work directly with infected patients, putting themselves at risk of contamination. Medical Officer Tae-Min Park spent his time studying every piece of data the Vallani had provided about their physiology and the plague's effects. Humans had treated dozens of alien species over the years, but each one presented unique challenges. The Vallani were silicon-based life forms with crystalline bone structures and copper-based blood chemistry. Their cellular repair systems were completely different from human biology, which meant standard treatments would not work. "The good news is that the plague appears to be species-specific," Park explained to his medical team during a briefing. "It was designed to attack Vallani's cellular structures, so it should not affect us directly. The bad news is that we cannot test our treatments on human subjects. We will have to develop the cure while working with dying patients, and we will only get one chance to get it right." The fleet's communication systems were constantly busy as ships coordinated their approach and shared information. The UES Mercy, commanded by Captain Jin A, reported that their xenobiology laboratory had identified potential weak points in the plague nanobots. The UES Hope had developed new surgical techniques for removing infected tissue. The UES Healing had created improved life support systems that might buy more time for treatment. But it was the report from the UES Guardian that worried everyone the most. Commander Sung Min had been analyzing the tactical situation around Vallani space and had detected signs of hegemony military preparation. "They are positioning forces for a quick strike," he reported during the daily fleet briefing. "If the Vallani Government falls, or if the population drops below critical levels, the hegemony will move in to claim the system. Admiral Lee considered this information carefully. The 7th Medical Division was a humanitarian fleet, not a military force, but every ship carried defensive systems and could protect itself if necessary. Their primary mission was to save lives, but they could not ignore the possibility that hostile forces might interfere with their work. "We will proceed as planned," Lee decided. "Our job is to cure the plague and save as many Villani as possible. If anyone tries to stop us from completing our mission, we will deal with that problem when it arises." The Admiral did not elaborate on what dealing with the problem might involve, but his captains understood. Human medical ships had faced hostile forces before, and they had never retreated from a humanitarian mission. Dr. Yoon-Young Lim prepared her field medical teams for planetary operations. Unlike many species, humans preferred to work directly on the surface of affected worlds rather than treating patients on orbital stations. This approach was riskier but more effective, allowing doctors to respond quickly to changing conditions and provide care to patients who were too sick to transport. "We will establish primary medical centers in the major population areas," Lim explained to her team leaders. "Each center will have fabrication units for producing custom nanobots, surgical facilities for advanced cases, and quarantine areas for studying the plague. We will work in shifts to maintain continuous operation until the crisis is resolved." The medical teams were equipped with the most advanced portable technology humanity had developed. Personal medical scanners that could analyze alien biology in real time, nanofabricators that could produce custom treatments within minutes, and protective suits that could filter out any known biological threat. Each team also carried emergency beacons that could call for immediate evacuation if the situation became too dangerous. Security Chief Dong Hyun Yu coordinated with the medical teams to ensure their safety during surface operations. Although the mission was humanitarian, the security teams were prepared for any threat that might arise. "Remember, our job is to protect the medical teams so they can do their work," Yu briefed his security officers. "We are not here to fight, but we will not hesitate to defend ourselves or our patients if attacked." As the fleet approached the edge of Villani space, long-range sensors began picking up detailed information about the 3 affected worlds. HFY was still functioning, but barely, with massive refugee camps surrounding the major cities. Villani 7, where the plague had started, showed almost no signs of life. Villani 4 was in the early stages of collapse, with government communications becoming sporadic and supply chains breaking down. Communications Officer Ji-Ho Moon worked constantly to maintain contact with Villani authorities and coordinate the fleet's arrival. The Villani government was grateful for human assistance, but clearly nervous about the approaching ships. They had requested medical aid and were receiving what appeared to be a military fleet. The human vessels were enormous and heavily armored, bearing little resemblance to the small, delicate hospital ships used by other species. "The Villani are asking about our intentions and the nature of our ships," Moon reported to Admiral Lee. "They seem concerned that we might have ulterior motives for coming to their system." This was understandable given the appearance of the human medical fleet. To outside observers, 12 massive warships approaching a weakened civilization looked like the beginning of an invasion. "Send them our complete medical credentials and treatment protocols," Lee replied. "Explain that our ships are large because we bring everything needed for major medical operations. We do not rely on local facilities or supplies." The Admiral paused and considered the situation. "Also, send them our humanitarian charter and testimonials from the 17 other species we have helped in similar situations. They need to understand that we are here to save lives, not to conquer territory." The final day of hyperspace travel was spent in intensive preparation as every department made last-minute adjustments to their equipment and procedures. The human medical fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, 12 massive ships materializing against the star field like dark omens of war. Admiral Woo-Jin Lee stood on the bridge of the UES Asclepius, watching as his sensors painted a picture of the Villani system that was worse than their most pessimistic projections. HFY hung before them like a dying ember, its once bright cities now dim with the lights of funeral pyres. Orbital traffic had nearly stopped, with only a few desperate ships still moving between the planets. On HFY, emergency controller Tae-Ho stared at his tactical display in growing horror. The 12 approaching ships were enormous, each one larger than the biggest vessels in the Volani fleet. Their angular hulls and heavy armor plating made them look like instruments of destruction rather than healing. "What have we done?" he whispered to his staff. "We asked for doctors and they sent us an invasion force." The human ships moved into orbit with military precision, their formation suggesting coordinated attack patterns rather than medical deployment. Each vessel bristled with sensor arrays and communication equipment that looked suspiciously like targeting systems to Volani observers. The largest ship, over 2 kilometers long, took position directly above the capital city like a sword hanging over the planet's throat. Prime Minister Jae-sung was rushed from his sickbed to the emergency command center, his gray-tinged skin showing the early stages of the plague that was killing his people. The government had barely enough healthy officials left to function, and now they faced what appeared to be an overwhelming military threat. "Contact the fleet immediately," he ordered weakly. "Demand to know their intentions." Communications officer Ji-Ho Moon aboard the UES Asclepius received the Volani transmission and immediately understood their concern. The human medical fleet looked nothing like the small, clearly marked hospital ships used by other species. To frightened observers, they appeared to be warships preparing for battle. "Admiral, the Volani government is requesting clarification of our mission," he reported. "They seem to think we are here to attack them." "Open a channel," Admiral Lee ordered. "Full medical credentials and humanitarian protocols." The communications system activated, broadcasting the complete documentation of the 7th Medical Division's charitable mission. Medical licenses, treatment records, testimonials from grateful civilizations, and the official humanitarian charter of the Terran Medical Corps flooded the Volani communication networks. But the damage was already done. Fear spread through the dying population faster than the plague itself. Refugee camps erupted in panic as word spread that humanity had sent warships instead of hospital ships. The few remaining Volani military units powered up their weapons, knowing they were hopelessly outgunned but determined to make a final stand. Defense Minister Boram, herself showing symptoms of the Great Death, authorized the activation of all remaining planetary defense systems. Dr. Da-Eun Choi reviewed the medical data streaming from the planet's surface and felt her heart sink. The plague had accelerated since their last communication, with new infections appearing at an exponential rate. "Admiral, we need to begin treatment immediately," she reported urgently. "Every hour of delay means thousands more deaths. We cannot wait for diplomatic clearance." Captain So-Ra Kim aboard the UES Nightingale monitored the increasingly frantic Volani communications. Government officials were arguing among themselves, with some calling for immediate surrender and others demanding a fight to the death. Military commanders were split between those who wanted to attack the human fleet and those who recognized the futility of resistance. "Sir, the Volani command structure is breaking down," she reported. "Fear and sickness are destroying their ability to make rational decisions." The situation became more complicated when long-range sensors detected new contacts approaching from the outer system. The hegemony fleet that had been lurking at the edge of Volani space was finally making its move. 12 destroyers and 4 heavy cruisers dropped out of hyperspace near the system's asteroid belt, their weapons charged and their intentions clear. They had come to claim the Volani worlds for themselves. Security Chief Dong-Hyun Yu analyzed the hegemony fleet composition and found it troubling. "Admiral, those ships are configured for planetary bombardment and occupation," he reported. "They are not here to help with the plague. They intend to eliminate any survivors and claim the empty worlds." This was a common hegemony tactic, waiting for civilizations to weaken themselves through war or disaster, then moving in to seize territory with minimal resistance. Medical Officer Tae-min Park worked frantically to prepare treatment protocols, while the political situation deteriorated around him. The nanofabricators were ready to begin producing customized medical nanobots, but they needed direct tissue samples from infected patients to calibrate properly. "We have to get down to the surface," he told Captain Kim. "Remote treatment will not work against this plague. We need direct patient contact." The hegemony fleet began its approach toward the inner system, moving slowly but deliberately toward Volani Prime. Their commander, war leader Vex Cole, studied the human medical fleet with confusion and growing concern. The 12 human ships were clearly military vessels despite their medical markings, and their positioning suggested they were prepared for battle. "What are these humans planning?" he wondered aloud. Medical ships do not need that much armor or those weapon mounts. Admiral Lee found himself caught between multiple crises. His medical teams needed immediate access to the planet to begin treating patients, but the Villani government was paralyzed by fear and indecision. The approaching hegemony fleet posed a clear threat to both his ships and the people they had come to save, and time was running out as the plague continued to spread through the dying population. Launch medical shuttles to all 3 worlds, Lee ordered. Full humanitarian protocols. We are here to save lives, and we will not be stopped by fear or misunderstanding. The massive bay doors of the human ships opened, revealing sleek shuttles that looked more like military dropships than medical transports. Each shuttle was heavily armored and equipped with defensive systems, designed to operate in hostile environments where other medical craft could not survive. The sight of armed shuttles launching from the human ships triggered a cascade of panic across the Villani system. Military commanders interpreted the launches as the beginning of an invasion, while civilians fled in terror from the landing zones. Prime Minister Jae-sung, barely conscious from his advancing illness, authorized his forces to open fire on any approaching human craft. Field Medical Leader Yoon-young Lim led the first shuttle toward HFY's capital city. Her team of 20 doctors and medics prepared for immediate deployment. The shuttle's defensive systems detected multiple targeting locks from Villani ground installations, but Lim maintained course. "Do not return fire unless directly attacked," she ordered her security team. "These people are sick and afraid. We are here to help them, not to fight them." The first Villani missiles launched just as the hegemony fleet detected the human shuttles. War leader Vex Cole realized that the humans were actually conducting some kind of military landing on the planet. "All ships, advance to attack position," he commanded. "The humans are invading Villani space. We will eliminate them and claim the system for the hegemony." Automated defense systems aboard the UES Asclepius detected the incoming Villani missiles and responded according to their programming. Point defense weapons that had been designed to protect patients from hostile fire engaged the primitive Villani rockets, destroying them harmlessly in the upper atmosphere. To observers on the ground, it looked like the human medical ship had effortlessly swatted aside their best weapons. Dr. Park's shuttle touched down in the courtyard of the largest remaining hospital on HFY, its armored hull steaming from atmospheric entry. Villani security forces surrounded the landing zone with weapons drawn, their fear and desperation evident in every movement. "Medical team deploying," Park announced over his communicator. "We are carrying nanofabricators and enough supplies to treat thousands of patients. Request immediate access to infected civilians." The shuttle's ramp lowered, revealing humans in full medical gear that looked disturbingly like military equipment. Their environmental suits were heavily armored, their medical scanners resembled weapon systems, and their emergency treatment packs looked like military supply containers. To the terrified Villani, it appeared that soldiers were emerging from the shuttle, not doctors. Hegemony destroyers accelerated toward the inner system, their commanders convinced that they were witnessing a human military operation against the weakened Villani. The fact that the human ships had easily defeated Villani missile attacks only confirmed their suspicions. "Target the largest human ship," Vex Cole ordered. "We will show these mammals that the hegemony does not tolerate interference in our expansion zone." Admiral Lee watched the tactical situation develop with growing alarm. His medical teams were on the ground trying to save lives, but everyone else in the system seemed determined to start a war. The Villani were attacking his shuttles out of fear, while the hegemony was approaching with clear hostile intent. "Signal all ships," he commanded. The hegemony plasma torpedoes died in brilliant flashes of light as the human defensive systems tore them apart, but war leader Vex Cole was already ordering his second salvo. He commanded 16 ships against 12 human vessels that appeared to be medical transports, and he expected an easy victory. The fact that his first attack had failed only convinced him that the humans had better shields than expected. He was about to learn how wrong he could be. Captain Hyun-woo Kang stood on the bridge of the UES Asclepius as proximity alarms screamed their warnings. The massive medical ship shuddered as more hegemony weapons struck its shields, but the barrier held easily. Around him, officers who had spent years treating patients and saving lives found themselves preparing for something they had hoped never to do again. "Sir, the hegemony fleet is closing to engagement range," reported Tactical Officer Seung-ho Jang. They seem to think we are helpless. Admiral Woo-Jin Lee watched the tactical display with growing anger. His medical teams were on the ground trying to save dying civilians, while hostile forces attacked his ships and prevented him from completing his humanitarian mission. The 7th Medical Division had faced interference before, but never anything this blatant. "Signal the hegemony fleet," he ordered coldly. "Tell them to withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response came in the form of a full torpedo spread from 4 hegemony destroyers. 24 plasma warheads streaked toward the human fleet, their combined firepower enough to cripple most military formations. But the human medical ships were not most formations, and they had been built to survive in the most dangerous regions of space, where pirates and hostile forces regularly attacked humanitarian missions. Automated systems throughout the human fleet detected the incoming threat and responded with mechanical precision. Weapons bays that had been sealed for decades began to open as override codes activated systems that most of the crew had forgotten existed. The UES Asclepius had been the most powerful dreadnought in the human fleet before its conversion to medical duty, and its weapons had been deactivated, not removed. Point defense clusters erupted from hidden panels along the ship's hull, filling space with coherent energy beams that intercepted every incoming torpedo. But these were not the limited defensive weapons the hegemony had faced before. These were military-grade systems designed to stop full battle fleet attacks, and they made the torpedo bombardment look like a child throwing stones at a mountain. On the planet's surface, field medical leader Yoon-Young Lim found herself pinned down behind her shuttle as Volani security forces continued their panicked attack. Her medical team was trying to reach infected civilians who were dying just meters away, but the constant weapons fire made movement impossible. "Security team, minimum force only," she ordered over her communicator. "These people are sick and, afraid. We do not want to hurt them." Security specialist Mi Young-han activated her suit's defensive systems and moved to protect the medical team. Her equipment had been designed for hostile environment operations, but it looked exactly like military assault gear to the terrified Volani. When she returned fire with her emergency weapon, the precisely aimed energy bolts disabled Volani soldiers without killing them, but the display of superior technology only increased their panic. In orbit, war leader Vex Cole stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His entire torpedo salvo had been destroyed without a single human ship taking damage. "All vessels, close to beam weapon range," he commanded. "These medical ships cannot withstand a direct assault." His destroyers and cruisers accelerated toward the human fleet, their energy weapons charging for point-blank combat. The UES Nightingale, commanded by Captain Sora Kim, found itself targeted by 3 hegemony destroyers that were approaching from multiple angles. The ship was smaller than the Asclepius, but just as heavily converted, its medical bays occupying spaces that had once held particle beam arrays and missile launchers. "Captain, the attackers are trying to surround us," reported Navigation Officer Chang Woo. "Oh. They intend to concentrate fire on our medical facilities." "That is unacceptable," Kim replied quietly. The idea of hostile forces deliberately targeting medical facilities violated every principle of civilized warfare, and it triggered protocols that had been built into every human ship. Tactical, enable defensive weapons systems, full authorization for patient protection. What happened next would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. The UES Nightingale's hull split open along hidden seam lines as massive particle beam arrays emerged from concealed weapon bays. The ship's medical laboratories had been built around the original weapon systems, not in place of them, and now those systems came back to life with devastating effect. The lead hegemony destroyer simply ceased to exist as the Nightingale's main. Particle beams struck it amidships. The weapon had been designed to crack battlecruiser armor, and the destroyer's shields collapsed instantly under the focused energy assault. Secondary beams reached out to engage the other 2 attackers, their precise fire crippling engines and weapon systems without destroying the ships entirely. Admiral Lee authorized fleet-wide defensive measures as more hegemony ships closed in, around his medical vessels. "All ships, protect the medical operations," he broadcast. "Any force that threatens our humanitarian mission will be neutralized." The order activated emergency protocols that had been dormant for decades, and the 12 ships of the 7th Medical Division began to reveal their true nature. The UES Mercy engaged 2 hegemony cruisers with weapons that emerged from bays marked as medical supply storage. The UES Hope destroyed a destroyer with a single shot from a gun that had been disguised as an atmospheric processing unit. The UES Healing crippled 3 attack craft with defensive systems that were supposedly designed to protect surgical equipment from electromagnetic interference. On Valani Prime, Communications Officer Jiho Moon worked desperately to contact the planetary government while battle raged in orbit above. "This is the UES Asclepius medical team," he broadcast on all emergency frequencies. "We are here to help your people. Please cease your attacks and allow us to treat the infected." But his words were lost in the chaos as Valani military units continued to fire on human medical shuttles. Dr. Taemin Park finally reached the hospital's emergency ward, carrying nanofabricator equipment that could save thousands of lives. Valani patients lay dying in corridors while their own security forces prevented human doctors from reaching them. "Stand down your weapons," Park called to the Valani soldiers. "Your people are dying while you waste time fighting us." The lead, Valani Sergeant, his scales already showing the gray tinge of early infection, kept his rifle aimed at the human doctor. "You are invaders," he said weakly. "Your warships are destroying our defenses. We will not surrender to you." The irony was lost on him that he was preventing the very people who could cure his disease from reaching him. In space, the hegemony fleet was learning a harsh lesson about the difference between medical ships and helpless targets. War Leader. Vexcol had lost 6 ships in the first 5 minutes of combat, and his remaining forces were being systematically dismantled by weapons that supposedly did not exist. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "Intelligence reports said they were hospital ships." "They are hospital ships, sir," the confused officer replied while watching another destroyer die under human fire. "But they are also fully armed warships. We have never seen anything like this." The concept of combining medical and military capabilities was foreign to most galactic civilizations, which typically maintained strict separation between their healing and fighting forces. Captain Kim aboard the Nightingale coordinated with the other human ships to create a protective perimeter around Valani Prime. The hegemony forces were in full retreat, but their attack had triggered automatic defense protocols throughout the human fleet. Weapon systems that had been dormant for years were now fully operational, and the galaxy was getting its first look at human military technology disguised as medical equipment. The tide of battle turned decisively when the UES Asclepius engaged the hegemony flagship directly. Admiral Lee had grown tired of the interference with his humanitarian mission, and he authorized the use of the ship's primary weapon system. The massive particle lance that emerged from the Asclepius's bow had once been capable of destroying planets, and it made short work of the hegemony battlecruiser. "This is Admiral Lee of the Terran Medical Corps," he broadcast to the surviving hegemony ships. "You have attacked a humanitarian mission and interfered with medical operations. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." The surviving enemy vessels needed no further encouragement and began jumping to hyperspace as quickly as their damaged engines would allow. On the planet's surface, the demonstration of overwhelming human firepower had the opposite effect that Lee had hoped for. The Valani military, already panicked by the plague and the approach of alien ships, interpreted the space battle as confirmation of their worst fears. The humans had destroyed a hegemony fleet in minutes, proving they were conquerors rather than healers. Field Medical Leader Lim found herself surrounded by Valani soldiers who were too frightened to think rationally. 3 weeks after the human medical fleet arrived at Valani Prime, the capital city was alive again for the first time in months. Dr. Taemin Park walked through the hospital corridors that had once been filled with dying patients, now busy with the sounds of recovery and hope. Children who had been at death's door were playing in the wards, their skin clear and healthy. Adults who had written farewell messages to their families were returning to work and rebuilding their lives. The Gray Death was extinct. The human nanobots had not only cured every infected patient, but had also eliminated every trace of the plague from the environment. The ancient weapon that had threatened to destroy an entire civilization was now nothing more than historical data in medical computers. Yet the victory had come at a cost that nobody had expected when the mission began. Cultural Liaison Officer Sujin Bei sat in the Vellani government building, trying to explain to confused officials why human medical ships looked like instruments of war. Prime Minister Jae-sung, now completely recovered from his infection, listened with growing amazement as she described humanity's approach to humanitarian missions. "You convert warships into hospitals?" he asked. "Why not build dedicated medical vessels like other species?" "Because other species' medical ships get attacked," Bei replied patiently. "Pirates target them for their valuable equipment and medicines. Hostile governments prevent them from reaching patients. Criminals hold them hostage for ransom. Human medical ships carry weapons not to conquer territory, but to ensure that nothing stops us from reaching people who need help." She gestured toward the window, where human shuttles continued to land with supplies and personnel. "We learned long ago that good intentions are not enough. Sometimes you have to fight to save lives." Admiral Woo Jin Lee stood on the bridge of the UES Asclepius, reading reports from across the galaxy as news of the Vellani incident spread through civilized space. Every major government was demanding explanations for the human medical fleet's military capabilities. The Galactic Health Organization had called emergency sessions to discuss new regulations for medical ships. 3 separate species had filed formal protests about humanity's deceptive humanitarian practices. "Admiral, we are receiving requests for medical assistance from 12 different worlds," reported Communications Officer Ji-Ho Moon. "But 8 of them specifically request that we not bring warships." The irony was not lost on anyone aboard the ship. The same capabilities that terrified other species were what made human medical missions so effective. On the planet's surface, Field Medical Leader Yoon Young Lim supervised the final cleanup operations at the main treatment center. Human medical teams had established temporary hospitals in every major city, treating over 2 million patients in 3 weeks. The operation had been flawlessly executed from a medical standpoint, but the political aftermath was going to be complicated for years to come. Young medical intern Ye-Jin Ko had become something of a celebrity among the Vellani children. At 24, she was the youngest member of the medical team, but her gentle manner and endless patience had made her a favorite in the pediatric wards. Vellani parents brought their recovered children to see the small human healer who had saved so many lives. "Will you stay with us?" a young Vellani girl asked her. "We want you to be our doctor forever." Ko smiled and knelt down to the child's level. "I have to go help other sick people on other worlds," she explained. "But your own doctors know how to make the medicine now. You will be safe." The human medical teams had not only cured the plague, but had also trained Vellani physicians in the use of nanobotic medicine, ensuring that such a disaster could never happen again. Fleet historian Jinwoo Nam worked with Vellani scholars to document the crisis and its resolution for future generations. The story would become part of both species' historical records, but the lessons learned were already being applied across the galaxy. "Your people have a saying," one Vellani historian told him. "To heal, one must first survive to reach the patient. Is that why your medical ships are so heavily armed?" "That is part of it," Nam replied thoughtfully. "But there is more to it than simple survival. We believe that healing and protecting are the same thing. When we see someone in danger, we do not just treat their injuries. We eliminate the danger itself. That is why our medical ships can fight. That is why our doctors carry weapons. That is why we will never retreat from a humanitarian mission, no matter who tries to stop us." The transformation of Vellani society was remarkable to observe. Cities that had been preparing for extinction were now planning for the future. The government was drafting new laws to prevent similar disasters. Scientists were studying the human, nanobotic technology to develop better medical treatments. Most importantly, the Vellani were reaching out to other species, offering to share what they had learned about both the plague and its cure. Captain Sora Kim of the UES Nightingale received word that her ship had been selected to establish a permanent medical station in Vellani space. The facility would serve as a training center for alien doctors who wanted to learn human medical techniques and as a rapid response base for future emergencies in the region. "It seems we are not leaving as soon as planned," she told her crew. "The Vellani want us to stay and teach them our methods." Security Chief Dong Hyun-yu found himself in the unusual position of training Vellani security forces in humanitarian protection protocols. The local military had been so impressed by the human approach to medical security that they wanted to adopt similar methods. "Your soldiers carry medical supplies along with weapons," observed Volani Colonel Hae Sung. "They are prepared to heal the people they are protecting, not just fight their enemies." "Every human soldier is trained in basic medical care," Yu explained. "Every human doctor is trained in basic combat skills. We do not separate healing and protecting into different jobs. They are the same job with different tools." This philosophy was spreading throughout Volani military and medical organizations, creating a new hybrid approach to public service. Dr. Dayon Choi published her research on the Great Death in the Galactic Medical Journal, sharing the details of how the plague had been defeated with scientists across the galaxy. The paper became the most downloaded medical research document in history, and universities throughout civilized space began incorporating nanobotic medicine into their curricula. The technology that had saved the Volani would now be available to help other species facing similar threats. The political implications of the Volani incident continued to reverberate through galactic society. The Federation called for new treaties, governing medical ship armaments. The hegemony, still smarting from their defeat, demanded reparations for their destroyed vessels. Several neutral species proposed the creation of an international medical fleet that would combine the resources of multiple civilizations. But it was the smaller changes that proved most significant. Medical schools across the galaxy began teaching courses on hostile environment operations. Hospital ships started carrying defensive weapons as standard equipment. Most importantly, the concept of humanitarian intervention took on new meaning, as species realized that sometimes force was necessary to deliver aid effectively. Admiral Lee received a personal message from the Galactic Health Organization's director, thanking him for his service and requesting a detailed report on human medical ship design principles. The document he prepared would become the foundation for new international standards for medical vessel construction and operation. Other species were finally beginning to understand that humanitarian methods were not deceptive or aggressive, just more realistic about the dangers faced by medical missions. The farewell ceremony for the human medical fleet drew millions of Volani to the capital city. Prime Minister Jae Sung spoke for his entire species when he said, "We asked for doctors and feared we had received conquerors. Instead, we learned that sometimes the two are the same thing. You came to heal us, and you fought anyone who tried to stop you from healing us. We will never forget what that means." As the 12 ships of the 7th Medical Division prepared to leave Volani space, they carried with them a new understanding of their role in galactic society. They were not just medical ships or disguised warships. They were something unique, vessels of hope that could fight their way through any threat to reach those in need. The final message from Admiral Lee to the Volani government was simple but profound. Remember that healing requires both compassion and strength. We have given you the tools to cure any disease, but you must be prepared to fight for the right to use them. The galaxy is not always kind to the weak, even when they are only weak because they choose to heal rather than hurt. Word of the Volani rescue spread throughout human space, inspiring a new generation of young people to join the medical corps. Applications to medical schools increased by 300%. As students learned about the brave doctors who had risked their lives to save an alien civilization. The story became required reading in human schools, teaching children that their greatest strength came not from their weapons, but from their willingness to use those weapons only to protect others. 6 months later,